There's a bill that is coming before us tomorrow that I believe should have vigorous debate. I believe that it does raise consequential issues, and we should debate them here vigorously on the floor of the House. But I want to be unequivocally clear to the American people that I support it, and I support it unapologetically. We have legislation before us that would ensure that foreign adversaries are not able to collect information on the American people, collect data on the American people, use that data to target the American people, undermine our national security, undermine our democracy, and undermine our way of life, which is precisely what is happening with the evidence we have before us. Both classified and very publicly known information indicates very much that TikTok, that has significant ownership by the Chinese Communist Party, that is targeting American citizens. And then there are some who are out professing that this would legislation that would try to prevent that would somehow undermine our freedom. Now look, I do not like the heavy hand of government being used, certainly not wantonly. An individual today, fairly well known out in the social media sphere, put out and said that we had this classified briefing today, and that the issue of election interference was brought up. This was a classified briefing that was not supposed to leak, by the way. That's how things work in Washington. It was leaked. Then we had the additional point here, not coincidentally, the anti-TikTok legislation. Let me clarify and stop. It is not specifically anti-TikTok legislation. It is anti-foreign adversary control of American data and information legislation. That this legislation, according to this individual, now being debated on the Hill, would allow the federal government to force the sale of any social media platform that interferes in elections, just so you know what's coming in 2025. Now, if I believe that to be true, I certainly wouldn't support the legislation. It is 12 pages long. I would note that a friend of mine who serves on the FCC, Brendan Carr, responded to this, and I happen to agree with Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr wrote, "It would be concerning to many if the bill allowed this." This being the post on X by someone this afternoon that I just recounted. It would be concerning, Mr. Carr says, to many if the bill allowed this. It does not. The text is definitive on this point. The bill does not apply to just any social media platform. Far from it. Here's the only and targeted application, Mr. Carr writes. 1, if you're an individual user, the bill confers zero authority to the government over you. That is true. 2, the bill only applies to applications controlled by one of 4 foreign adversary governments previously codified in law by Congress: China, Iran, North Korea, or Russia. The bill is clear that it is not enough to merely have operations there or do business there. It must be controlled by one of those 4 governments. Number 3, even then, the bill only applies if the application presents a demonstrated and significant threat to national security. Control by one of 4 foreign governments alone isn't even enough under the bill. So you got to have significant ownership by these foreign governments. You've got to have a demonstrated and significant threat to national security. And then, number 4, only after public process provided in Congress reported to with a description of the specific national security threat. Every single one of those hoops and more must be cleared and met. It is very narrow. It confers no authority to go after any other application, even if someone were to allege that it engaged in election interference. What is happening here is a reflexive reaction and a sort of scaremongering tactic. Now, let me pause. I do believe this legislation should have full debate. This is also why I prefer legislation to go through the Rules Committee. This is also why I prefer legislation to be amendable, amended, debated. But this bill was passed out. It's trying to be moved so that it doesn't open up for the possibility of undermining the legislation that was very narrowly crafted with a 50-0 vote out of the E&C committee. Now, many of my conservative and more libertarian friends say, well, 50-0 vote gives me the heebie-jeebies and I don't like it. Well, you know what? That's my general default position in this town. But this is different. I want to be very clear. This is different than what I'm about to talk about in just a minute, which is the uniparty in this town that decides everything for you and is bent on whatever the defense industrial complex says and jams through spending bills and limits our ability to proceed. This is different because it is very specific and narrowly tailored towards the end of ensuring that Americans' data and Americans' safety and security are being protected. That's it. Now, it may not be perfect. Nothing this body ever does is perfect. But this bill was put forward to address that issue, and it is a giant step forward, in my opinion, to recognize the threat against our freedom and our liberty that the Chinese Communist Party poses to us, to our children, to our grandchildren, the extent to which they are using algorithms to undermine and focus on our kids. That's what they're doing. They are targeting our children. We know it. They are targeting our people. We know it. They are skewing the data and the results. If you do a search for China virus, now just my utterance of that word make my colleagues on the other side of the aisle's head explode. If you search for China virus, the difference between Instagram, which is hardly some paragon of like right-wing reporting, the difference in the algorithm response on Instagram versus TikTok, it's 400 to 1. The responses you get if you search for China virus. If you search for Hong Kong, I think it's 180 to 1. If you search for Tiananmen Square, I think it is 80 to 1. The fact is, you're getting demonstrably shaped information out of TikTok. And what most people don't understand, most parents at home while their kids are out using TikTok, and this is a parental problem, not just China, China is specifically limiting the information that kids can see in China. They're making sure that the kids in China see patriotic, pro-China, engineering, all of this stuff you want to try to have your kids see in order to make them into what you want to make them. In our country, we are allowing freedom to undermine our freedom. And that's what's actually happening here. It's the false name of freedom, to be clear, to undermine our freedom. It's not actual freedom, because the freedom that we have is being attacked by China, and we're sitting back in the false name of freedom saying, oh, no, let's not touch that. I hope that tomorrow we will crack through that. I hope tomorrow, on a bipartisan basis, we will send a message that the Chinese Communist Party cannot knowingly attack us and get a response that is a whimper, because that's what we've been doing so far. If you wanted to destroy America, you would set out and do exactly what China has been doing, bit by bit, targeting our people, undermining our access to information, or at least information that they're trying to control, and target our kids with propaganda very specifically. Yes, we have problems with Google, but I'm getting tired of the but Google. Yes, we have problems with Facebook, but I'm tired of the but Facebook, because I get that a lot. The fact is, those things, we want to break up Google? Let's sit down and do it. Happy to have a bipartisan bill to talk about that. You want to deal with Facebook? Happy to have that conversation. You want to talk about the misuse of the power of those big companies, attacking First Amendment rights, targeting people for their political beliefs? Happy to have that conversation. But do you know how hard that is? Because none of us want to use the power of the government to go after companies so that the government is saying what they know is best about what that means for our freedom and our rights here in this country. That's what we're wrestling with under our Constitution, to protect our rights. But when the Chinese Communist Party is actively targeting the American citizens, I'm tired of people hiding behind the flag to let China do it. And that's what's happening. And people are going to do it in the false name of freedom and in the false name of, oh, let's go do this because, I don't know, a former president says so or a media personality says so. How about we do our job here in the House chamber to take on the Chinese Communist Party and not act like they're not doing what they're doing? I think it's important. I support the legislation. I appreciate my friend Mike Gallagher working on it. I co-sponsor it. I will defend it tomorrow. I will defend it in the future. I'm defending it now. I hope we pass it tomorrow on the floor of the House.